Hey everybody, so I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood yesterday, and it is a current thing, so let's do it. Quentin Tarantino is an absolutely brilliant filmmaker. There's certain things he did that he not only did better than anyone in his time, he did better than anybody who ever made a movie. So I was excited to see this movie. I wanted to get a glimpse of those things I missed, but of course the movie wasn't perfect, nothing ever is. So we'll get a chance to talk about that, and some things that I think he might have done on purpose, and some things I think might have just been a natural outgrowth of the way he makes movies. That changed in the way they came off because the context in which he's made the movies has changed. It's kind of funny because Quentin Tarantino is known for primarily Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. And it was kind of weird because he was doing homages to the movies he liked when he was young, but instead of copying the subject matter of the movie and making a great movie, which he of course could do, he started copying the quality level of those movies in addition to the subject matter. And I think that's where some problems started to creep in. But also there's been some consistent things across all his movies that actually started coming off differently as times have changed. And that's one of the things I want to focus on today. So let's do that. The first thing is, Quentin Tarantino, as far as I could see, never really put large-scale significance in any of his stories. They're all about individual people's lives. Previously, that didn't really matter because his movies had large-scale significance to the movie business as a whole. But without that innovation, you lose that sense of learning while you're watching the story. And that's very dangerous because Quentin never actually put a big lesson in any of his movies. When we're not innovating on the structure of the plot anymore, you don't get it from outside the movie either. And that gave Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a kind of weird feeling to me. When I was walking out of the theater, it actually seemed kind of pointless. I also realized later that the movie doesn't have much of a plot. Pitt and DiCaprio never actually have a strong goal. And the tension is all built around the Manson family, but you just don't see them enough. On top of that, I don't know if there were really any surprises in the movie. There is definitely something that goes against what you would expect if you knew the history you were watching. But he did that in Inglourious Basterds too. And likewise, it's not enough that a good guy wins in the end in a movie, and it's not enough that a bad guy loses. When it works the absolute best, the good guy wins because of the things that make him good, and the bad guy loses because of the things that make him or her bad. So in the end, I don't think it's a big surprise to say that there are good people who have good things happen to them, but we spend the whole movie watching other qualities in that character. And so that limits the emotional impact of it. We don't get as satisfied. And likewise, there's obviously bad characters in the movie, and bad things happen to them, but we actually didn't get to see a lot of those bad traits. I think the movie relies on you knowing the history of what happened that year and who those people were. But I don't think it goes as well as if they had made it immediate and showed it to you directly in the movie itself. I think it was too long ago that it happened. And you really want to see those people's actions lead directly to their fate. But this has always been the case with Quentin Tarantino's movies. He never put that much effort into those types of things. And I think there's actually a specific reason for it in this case. A director can get good feelings for reasons that don't translate to the audience. And that's very, very dangerous. And I think that kind of happened here. 1969 was obviously an important year in his life. He was young and a lot of things were happening. And I think he was really excited to recreate 1969 and revisit that and pay homage to those types of movies that were out then as well. I think that gave him a great sense of emotional confirmation. I think he was happy to put that on the screen and show that that was important. But I wasn't alive in 1969, so your mileage may vary there. Likewise, I think he really liked hanging out with Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. And unfortunately, I think that caused a situation where they had such a good time being on set and being around each other that they forgot to put a lot of that real emotion into the movie itself. So you get this result where, if you notice, Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt are messing around with fake mustaches and playing the movie one way, and the other actors who aren't as famous and weren't hanging out with them on set are playing it straight. And to be honest, I think those scenes are better. It kind of turns out that once you're successful and have been in good movies and had good reviews, you get pleasure from other things. In this case, hanging out with other actors and directors, or as we've seen here, promoting your personal relationships by casting lots and lots of famous people's children in this movie. That was one thing that I think changed from Quentin Tarantino's first movies. If you watch Reservoir Dogs, they are not screwing around in that movie. And it's hard to connect to a movie and take it seriously if you don't think the actors really care and respected what they were doing. The movie does keep Quentin Tarantino's really patient sense of pace where you don't get confused, and I think that's going to really help the reviews of the movie. Because one of the things that makes people give a movie a bad review is when it has a sense of being offensive to them. It's loud or arrogant or confusing or something like that, and that's what makes people have that negative surge of energy that makes them want to strike back at the movie and causes the really bad reviews to come in. When that's not there, people will often think the movie was pretty good even if it didn't give them a lot of other feelings, which I think is pretty interesting. But with that pace, in the 90s movies, you were always waiting for something to happen, or the characters were talking about something funny or interesting. Here, there are some scenes, like when Brad Pitt goes to the Manson Ranch, that have that tension, but others don't, and the dialogue, possibly because he was copying that 60s style, doesn't really interest you either. So they just go on and on. But I think you can see how, in a lot of cases, Quentin Tarantino has kept the same style since the 90s, and in some situations it works, but in a lot of ways those things that were going on with his life in the 90s when he was this filmmaker who was changing movies made up for the small scale of his stories. And that's not really happening anymore. So overall, I don't think there was any comforting moral story about the success of a good person in the movie or the real story around the movie, and there was nothing new to learn in the plot of the movie or how the movie was made. And I think that's why I got a feeling that the whole thing was kind of pointless. But of course, if you did care about the 1960s and you were interested in the Manson family and you wanted to have a homage to those things, or I suppose if you're a fan of Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio and wanted to see them in a movie together, it will make a difference for you and you'll probably like the movie a lot. But the issue is going to be what percentage of the potential audience has that attachment to that time period and those actors. And I think that's going to determine the box office and ratings of the film. So we'll see how that turns out. That's my take on it, and I hope you found it interesting. I'll be back soon.